of my sermon this morning is 3 Stories and a Dragon. The first story goes like this. In the darkness, something was happening at last. A voice had begun to sing. Sometimes it seemed to come from all directions at once. Its lower notes were deep enough to be the voice of the earth herself. There were no words. There was hardly even a tune. But it was beyond comparison the most beautiful noise ever heard. 2 wonders began to happen at the same moment. One was that the voice was suddenly joined by other voices, like our choir, right? More voices than you could possibly even count. They were in harmony with the first voice. The second wonder was that the blackness overhead began blazing with stars. They didn't come out gently one by one as they do on a summer evening. One moment there had been nothing but darkness. The next moment, 1,000,000 points of light leaped out. Single stars, constellations, planets, brighter and bigger than any in our world. The new stars and the new voices began at exactly the same time. If you had seen it and heard it, you would have felt quite certain that it was the stars themselves that were singing, and that it was the first voice, the deep one, which had made them appear and made them sing. This is from the Chronicles of Narnia. C.S. Lewis's 7-book series on the magical kingdom of Narnia. The kingdom in which there were talking animals, there was deep magic, there was Aslan, the lion, who represents God, represents Christ in the book. This particular passage came from chapter 8 of The Magician's Nephew. And it was written later in the series, but it is a creation story. As 2 children were fighting, and tripped through this place at a lamppost, they stumbled upon this blank space and watched creation happen. We use stories to tell about things we know. We use stories to try and explain things we don't quite understand, to have some sort of understanding. And we heard a little bit from Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. Genesis 1 I read just the beginning because it's repetitive, right? The first day, the second day, the third day, the fourth day, all the way through to day 6, and then day 7, God blessed it and rested on the Sabbath, called that a holy rest time. It tells us the story of creation. Day 1, this happened. Day 2, this happened. Day 3, this happened. And God saw it and said it was good. It's very poetic. It's very systematic in its explanation of creation. It's not much of a narrative, but it shows how God planned in orderly fashion, like those of us who like lists and order. It was right in order. And on the 7th day, it was good. That happens in chapter 1 through beginning of chapter 2. Many of us may know this already, but some of us may not know or forget that there are 2 creation stories in Genesis. The first one is that systematic, line by line, day by day description. The second one starts in chapter 2, halfway through verse 4, and it is a different kind of creation story. It's one that is connectional. The first one is more cosmic list. The second one is more connectional, and it actually starts out with God breathing life into humanity, forming humanity out of the dust or the clay, and then breathing life in. It's a story about God, as we move into chapter 3, walking with the people, Adam and Eve, which we're going to talk about next week, but God walking in this relational way with the humanity that God created. It's a loving narrative story. We hear about the serpent in that story and the apple in that story as we go down the road. It's the story of God loving humanity even when humanity does something dumb. God clothes humanity. God puts them out into a place and walks with them and talks with them throughout the rest of history. So there's your three stories. C.S. Lewis, Genesis 1, Genesis 2. There are ancient stories about creation. There's a lot of them. The oldest one comes from an ancient Aboriginal community from Australia. It's an oral tradition that's been passed down for 60,000 years. 60,000. 60 millennia. It's a long time, right? This story is titled sometimes The Dream, The Dreamer, The Dream Time. And one of the stories that comes out of this creation narrative is about a rainbow serpent that lands on the earth and carves out all the rivers and the lakes on earth that eventually fill with water. There's another ancient story that happened in Babylon. So the Babylonians, the Canaanites, the Urgut people, at that time, this was around the second millennium. So think 1800 BCE to maybe 1100 BCE. 1015, 1018, or 1100 to 1800 years before Christ, right? This story talks about, there's a huge epic called Enuma Elish, if you've ever heard of that. It's an epic story of time. And one of those things is this creation story. And in this creation story, there is a goddess. She is a sea goddess, a sea serpent who emerges from the chaos. And the word that's used, actually, the description that's used is actually pointing to the fact that she is chaos, that she makes chaos. Just chaotic time. Well, she's a goddess, and now there's this god that emerges, this champion god named Marduk. And he battles with this goddess named Tiamat. And he conquers her to be the supreme god, and then he creates stars, and he does all the things. And out of her corpse, it says he split her in two and created the heaven and the earth, and then went on to put stars in the sky. Now the Israelites, if you think about the Canaanites, right? The Israelites came out of exile from Egypt. They wandered around for a number of years, and they landed in, where did they land? The land of milk and honey. So the Canaanites, they went in and they took over the Canaanites. So this happened at the same general time period, that time period between the first and second millennia. They were hearing and discerning the same kinds of things about God and the universe. So they would have heard these stories about Tiamat and Marduk. Maybe not the one in Australia, because that was pretty far away. I don't think any Australians traveled Israel at that time. 60,000 years later. So we hear about these stories of serpents and dragons, and there's several different words that are used throughout the Bible. And talk about, like I said, with the kids, the dragons. And I want to read you something. This is a description of a dragon. You're going to hear it. There is terror all around its teeth. Its back is made of shields in rows, shut up closely as with a seal. One is so near to the other that air cannot come between them. They are joined one to another. They clasp each other and cannot be separated. It sneezes, flash forth light. Its eyes are like the eyelids of the dawn. From its mouth go flaming torches. Sparks of fire leap out. Out of its nostrils comes smoke. Its breath kindles coals, and a flame comes out of its mouth. The folds of its flesh cling together, and its heart is as hard as stone. Though the sword reaches it, it does nothing, nor does the spear, the dart, or the javelin. It counts iron as straw, and bronze as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make it flee. Stones slung at it are turned to chaff. It laughs at the rattle of javelins. Its under parts are like sharp pieces of pottery. On earth it has no equal. It is a creature without fear. Now that sounds like something that might come out of The Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, the Dragon Slayer. It's actually God talking to Job in the 41st chapter of Job. Dragons are in the Bible. Does that mean they're this picture of the mythical creatures that we call dragons today? I don't know. I believe in Santa Claus. So I think I can believe in dragons. I believe in the Easter Bunny. Dragons are mentioned with different words. Tannin, Leviathan. Even in Revelation, it's this Greek word drakon. It's actually dragon then in Revelation. 13 times, I think, in chapter 12 of Revelation. These stories about dragons, about chaos, about the creation of the earth are timeless. God has been speaking to creation, all of creation, revealing God's self to us and to the earth. We grapple at best to try and understand what that means. No one was standing there on the day that God created the earth, typing it into their computer, right? We make things to try and understand. And yet there's a big difference between the mythical stories, as we would think of them, the ancient Babylonians, and what the people of Greece and Athens would have thought about creation and gods. There's a difference between that and what we believe about our God. And that gives us hope, because in all of these stories, someone had to conquer another to become the supreme being. There was violence. There was battle. Marduk had to take out Tiamat and use her carcass to make creation. God spoke, and the earth was. God said, "Let there be light," and there was. God did not have to make something out of chaos, like Marduk, God simply created and has control over chaos. That is the hope that we hold on to. My question is, what dragons are in your life? What dragons are hard as stone, like the dragon's heart? What dragons are there that breathe fire on your every day that you need God to quench? What smoke is in your way? They can't allow you to see clearly. You can't see the path ahead that you need God to blow the breath of life into. What dragons are in our lives? Because God created everything. God has control over everything. God has purview over everything. And our hope is that we can lift those things up to God. And like the first in creation, walk alongside God as our friend, our protector, and our champion. May it be so with you this day.